Roxanne or Pete? Roxanne is a curator.
Since I didn't introduce myself, I might as well.
Oh, well, get up there and introduce yourself.
Well, one thing is very clear, and you can see that by what Bob just said. What a diverse group of people. And we do all have a story. And that's why he asked me, because we talked on the phone, he said, God, you really got a story. You really ought to get it out there. And I'm sure a lot of you are the same way. I've started so many times on writing that book. I just never get anywhere with it. You know what I mean? I get halfway through the first chapter and I think, oh man, you know. But there's really a story, and we do need to do something. Make a film, write it down, publish a book, because that's what kind of brought me back into the fold. God, it's 45 years since I was in DET-A. And this is my first reunion. And that's probably only due to the logistics of it. I'm on the West Coast. I'm in California. To get here, it's a difficult trip. And I regret that I didn't make some of those trips, like when Jeff Raker was still around. I was in that era, 75 to 79, a lot of stuff happened. I mean, it was the golden era of Detachment A. When we had Stanley Olchovik and Jeff Raker, and you probably didn't know that, it was a triumvirate. I was the other crowd in the room, because I was native German. I had named Kelley. Nobody other than my team members knew that I was even German. But, and I always felt, because of that, I was really born for that job. I really was. DET-A, that was me. That's what I was destined to be. Think about it. A German kid that grew up in January of 1944 in Germany.
Wow.
While, I mean, the Allies were bombing the shit out of Germany at that point. Germans had lost. In March of 1945, I was 1 year old. We came one day out of we had underground bunkers and stuff that we had to go in because of the constant air attacks. And we came out one day and the home we lived in was gone. There was nothing. I was 1 year old. My 7-year-old uncle was pushing me in a baby buggy, and we got to the street that we lived on and it was level. Hey, let me say real quick though, I never held it against the Americans. I wanted to be American from the minute I met the American soldiers that came to Germany. They were the kindest people. They were the kindest soldiers. Thank God I lived in the American sector. Can you imagine if I lived in the Russian sector? I wouldn't be here. You know, the atrocities they committed.
You're a dead guy, you escaped.
Yeah. I was the lucky one. But it kind of, that was my introduction to Americans, you know, soldiers in tanks driving by. We had to live in my aunt had a farm, sort of like, and it was out on the outskirts of Wiesbaden, Germany. And Wiesbaden was actually a Kurstadt. It was a resort town. Why they leveled that one, I never could figure out, but that's war, you know, retaliation, whatever. So we lived in this barn, and I would see the American tanks come by. And the American GIs, they would give us like Hershey bars and Coca-Cola, and I knew from that point forward, I wanted to go to America and drink Coca-Cola and eat Hershey bars. Can you think of anything better? And then I found out about Levi's and things like that. So it was a win-win. I initially grew up as a German until age 12. I've got one of the ugliest birth certificates you can imagine. On there is SS Scharführer, that was my father. Do you know how long it took me to get a secret and top secret clearance? Oh my God. Because I found out at that time, they actually investigate your background when you get those top clearances. And they go to the country, they talk to my uncles and people like that, because that birth certificate, I mean, you know, can I be in DET-A? But that was many years after that. By then it had all been cleared up. Hey, as a 1-year-old, come on, was I responsible for World War II? Of course not. So at age 12, my mother, I didn't wind up living with my mother and father because it was a kind of a scandal. My grandfather didn't like my real father, so that didn't work out too well. So I wound up eventually being adopted, and that's where the name Kelley comes from. My stepdad at that time, he was an American. He was a master sergeant in missile units in Germany. And my mother married him, and at age 12, I came to America finally. Achieved my initial goal. And from there, I had another opportunity to go back to Germany as a dependent and polish up my German, keep it like, you know, at a level that's appropriate with my age and all that. Because I did want to maintain both languages. One of the things you get in German school at an early age, I started learning English at age 3. And that helped me to where you meet a lot of Germans or, you know, German-born Americans, they have a real strong accent. People think I'm Irish because I've got the name Kelley. I don't have a German accent because I grew up so early, you know, speaking the English language. And then my mom married an American, so that just kind of made it easier, the transition. So in 1963, I decided I wanted to join the military. I was very patriotic. Foreigners tend to be very patriotic, especially Europeans that have lived in places like Germany, and some of you are from places like Estonia and stuff like that. You know what it means to be an American. And I was very proud of that, and volunteered for the military in 1963. I was a triple volunteer. I wanted to be airborne, special forces, and I wanted to be a medic. And I got all 3 of those. So I started off my career enlisted. So I saw both sides of it, and that helped me throughout my career in the military, especially in special forces assignments. Because if you can walk into that team room and say, hey, I was a team medic before I was an officer, it just levels the playing field.
Sure does.
They know they can't give you any bullshit, because I've been there, I've done that. You know, I've been there where you are, so it gave me instant credibility. That was one of my best assets as far as having served in special forces, having been in special forces enlisted. The Marines have a really good name for it. An officer, they call him a Mustang. If he was enlisted and then he's an officer. And they're more accepted by the NCOs than other officers. Because people that have a difficult, Vinny, but he did a really good job of blending in right away and becoming a team member. Because if you walk into a team as an officer and you think that you're going to be in charge, SF training for enlisted was a year long. My medical training and all the SF training, and then you know, dog lab and all that stuff, and going to OJT in Fort Rucker, Alabama, and becoming a minor surgeon just about. You know, that was so extensive. I mean, when you're trained to be a special forces soldier, it's the best there is.
And I thought I was in charge.
What's that?
And I thought I was in charge.
I know you did. But you know, and then you walk into that team and the team sergeants, you're talking about people that have seen it all. And that's who basically runs that team. That team sergeant, I mean, I was an exception. I was unusual, because when I came in my team, I ran that team, because I had been on both sides of that. You know, I didn't need to prove myself. I was a master parachutist and all these things that I'd already acquired. I went to jump school in Bad Tolz, you know. I went to missions in Bad Tolz, in the 10th Special Forces Group. You'll know this name. Guess who my company commander was? Ludwig Feistenhammer. And here comes a German kid named Kelley. Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay, I was
Oh.
gonna introduce Roxanne, okay.
Oh, you know.
I thought you said.
You didn't know I started?
No. All I got to mention, I'll get
You thought I
tired.
was just introducing myself?
I did.
Well, I kind of called this, I was born for this job. Did I mention that? I really was. And so Ludwig Feistenhammer,
I remember.
once he got past the name Kelley, he took a liking to it, you know. And as a team medic, I wound up on a German team. We all had area orientations in 10th Special Forces Group. Have a lot of you, or any of you, served in the 10th in Bad Tolz, Lengries? Yeah. So you know what I mean. We had a lot of DPs, we had a lot of, you know, Czechoslovakians, Hungarians, you name it. Stan Olchovik, a lot of those guys came through 10th Special Forces Group. But the odd thing is, and I've told Bob that, I never heard about DET-A. Nobody knew about DET-A. I don't even know to this day how I finally wound up there, because I didn't know about it. God, I would have volunteered every year to go to DET-A had I known about it, you know. Because we did sit in 10th group down in Lengries, where the actual line companies were, we did similar things. Like I would go on 1 2-month operation one time. They gave me a VW bus, a BMW motorcycle, and some money, and then I just had to go fend for myself. And then establish things. Since I was native German, I met the mayor of this town, and the mayor, he had a machine shop, so he put me up. I lived with his family, pretended to work in his machine shop, and then would recruit people, because our mission was, in case the balloon went up, we would form the resistance, you know. And that was a similar mission to what we had, the Stay Behind mission in Berlin, you know, to where if the balloon went up, the only thing I worried about, a lot of the team members that had to learn the German language, I was going to hide them. You know what I mean? Because how long can you last, you know, if you have to pretend to be a German? That was the part I'm glad we never had to test how that would work out.
Absolutely.
Because think about it, my documentation, they didn't have to make anything up. They used my name was Klaus Peter Grandegger. Hey, can you get any more German? And that's the documentation I had in DET-A. And I don't know if you ever got into the finer points of, they did have every documentation for every one of you that you were from somewhere. And if you were fortunate enough to have like a background, you know, with a European sounding name like Polish, Hungarian, stuff like that, they could build it around that. If you had an American name, you had to change your identity completely. And like I say, I'm glad we never had to test that part of it, because that would have been a challenge. For some of us who were natives, you know, of Europe, because you can be there, and you can be of Polish descent, you can be of Czech descent and all that stuff, but it gives you some credibility, because I would go like over to East Berlin, and I would talk to the people, and man, they would just about, they'd embrace me, please take me back, take me with you. They didn't want to be communist.
Yeah.
They didn't want to be there. They wanted to be like us. They knew what we had. They knew what kind of life we had, and that's all their goal in life was to be free. So our mission would have been enhanced by that, the Stay Behind mission, let's say, if the Soviets had decided, you know, they wanted to take over, that the Germans didn't like the Soviets. Even the East Germans, they really didn't, but they didn't have a choice, you know. So if that mission would have ever happened, I think we would have been well prepared, because I was not just a team leader in DET-A, I was also the S3. At the end of my tour, I was there for 4 years, 75 to 79. And I got to see, there were only 4 of us in the unit at any one time that had access to some of that stuff that we had. And it was amazing. I mean, the stuff we had buried in the woods, holy cow. I've always wondered who was the last guy there. Who got that stuff?
It's all in that RV
I
outside.
mean, we're talking about gold coins and stuff. I mean, you know, weapons, radios. I mean,
Call Bob Wise.
it's amazing the stuff that we had buried in the woods. And the scary part of it, and I was talking to Vinny about that last night, because he wound up being S3 at the end too. As the S3, you had to sign for all that shit. Can you imagine? You're signing for stuff. Terry Swafford, I love the guy. I mean, he would say, "Oh, damn it, don't worry about it, Kelly. God damn it, it's stuff." You know, I said, "But Terry, I'm signing for this stuff, and it looks like this would be really valuable. Can I see it?" He said, "No, we're not going to dig it up." Remember, Terry Swafford had a really unique technique. I mean, he said it, office and everything, you know.
Elmer.
So I signed the piece of paper. I think you signed it too, right? Yeah. You took it for granted that it was all there. You know, once in a while, some of it was renewed and all that. But we had a hell of an arsenal and ammunition and funds and, you know, to sustain us.
I tried to find it back in 2000.
Oh, you went back there and looked for it?
No, I'm kidding.
That's bad.
Well, anyway, in that transition from like, 10th Special Forces group, and then Ludwig Weissenheimer, he sent me to 7th Army NCO Academy. Did any of you, while you were over there? Yeah, there you go. Yeah. I went to 7th Army NCO Academy. I was gun-ho at the time. SF medic, come on. What's it?
Really?
SF medics, you get promoted really quickly. You make it up to E6 very fast. But then where do you go from there? You pretty much need to go in operations or intel if you're an NCO in Special Forces to progress. Because as an SF medic, you kind of max out at the E7 level, and then unless you're like, you know, in a group head medic or something like that, there isn't very much you can do to advance. You got to get an O&I. So Weissenheimer called me in after I went to the 7th Army NCO Academy. I got Distinguished Graduate, Award for Excellence, Award for Leadership. I cleaned up and wound up getting the Trojan Horse Award. For those of you that have been in the 10th group, they don't give that out very often. I did get the Trojan Horse Award. I should wear that thing. It's good looking. I mean, really nice looking big badge, you know, Trojan Horse. Anyway, he said, if you want to get promoted, because you're an E6 medic and you're just too young and it's going to be a while before you can make E7, why don't you apply for OCS? He said, hey, it's a pay raise, right? I said, yeah. So I applied for OCS, went to Infantry OCS in Fort Benning, School for Boys, and same place you went to Airborne School. That's the same place I went to jump school. And in 1968, walked out as brand new lieutenant. And again, initially, when I went to Special Forces, I need to go back a minute. Because you know how the military, they tend to not do their homework right. So what were they going to do after I finished all that training in Special Forces when I was enlisted? They were going to send me to Panama. I'm a native German. I'm bilingual, fluent. They sent me to Sands School of Languages to learn Spanish. Hello. And I was going to go to Panama, the 8th Special Forces Group. I thought, this is bullshit. You know, I'm walking through the Pentagon as a young, what was I, Spec 4, I guess, when you're finished with medical team. I think I was a Spec 4. My beret on, you know, feeling good and all that, had my full badge and everything. And I walked by this general's office. He said, "Trooper, come here, come here. It's been a long time since I've seen an airborne trooper. You're Special Forces, congratulations and all that." And he said, "Where are you going?" And I said, "I just finished language school and I'm going to Panama." And he said, "You don't sound too happy about that." And I said, "No, I'm a native German." He said, "What?" Is that what we do in the military? And I said, yeah, they just sent me to Sand School of Languages. And he said, are you proficient in German? I said, I'm fluent. You know, I can switch in a second. I mean, ich kann Deutsch reden. Ist mir egal. And he said, damn, I'm gonna get your orders changed. He got my orders changed to 10 Special Forces Group. Finally, somebody that recognized, you know, put the guy that has the qualifications in the right position.
Yes, Billy.
And that kind of, from that point forward, that worked in my favor. Because when I graduated from OCS, the first thing I did when I got to Fort Bragg, I did get 6 Special Forces Group. A group that very few people served with, because I don't think it was around very long. But I went and got my, in the military they had language qualifications. Well, I took that test for German. I got the highest interpreter's rating that you could get. You know, I mean, it's a no-brainer. I'm German, American. I'm American first. I was German. So when I took that language test and then got to Fort Bragg, 6 Special Forces Group, they had a thing called Gabriel Demonstration Team. God, it's amazing how many of you have done the same thing. I mean, shit, we all have the same story, it turns out, huh? Gabriel Demonstration. Ich bin Hauptmann Kelley der Abteilungschef. Ich bin für die Ausbildung und Einsatz dieser Abteilung verantwortlich. Again, a no-brainer, because they had to have people that were from different parts of the world that speak the language, you know, and my team, oh my God, you talk about a melting pot. I mean, I had everything from Polacks to Spanish to French, you name it. And that's what they wanted, to put on a good show, you know. And mine was German. God, did we brief dignitaries, because that was the era when Kennedy had given us the parade. So we were really in the limelight at that time. It was a good time to be in SF. That didn't last very long, but it was at that time. So 6th Special Forces Group, I got to go to Panama, but to the Jungle Warfare School. Oh my God. What were those things that hang out in the trees, that move about a mile, I mean a foot in 2 hours or something? Sloth. Big old hooks and stuff. Boa constrictors. We took 2 of them back in kit bags. One of them was 16 feet long, the other one 11 feet long. The 11-footer didn't make it. But you could see it when we were at the airport. In those days, things were really lax. Kit bags that were breathing. Nobody cared. Nobody even looked in there. The second snake made it, I think, a year. We fed it chickens. These boa constrictors, have you ever watched them when they eat? You just put the whole animal in there and watch it go through until it comes out at the end. The most amazing thing. So that I did finally get to visit the 8th Special Forces Group, but like I say, for Jungle Warfare School. It was a good preparation at the time, they thought, if you're going to go to Vietnam. So I get my orders finally. Oh, I did go to Halo School too. Again, we talked Halo stories a while ago. Oh, one of the instructors, there you go. I mean, did we really do that weird shit? I mean, 24,000 feet walk off out of an airplane? Out of the back ramp? Are you kidding me? Would I do that now? Hell no. You know, would I do that 20 years ago? No. You know, what was I thinking? I think my first Halo jump was sort of like, well, it was a night jump even though it was daylight. I mean, I can't remember a thing. I thought, is this for real? And that euphoric feeling of floating through the air like a bird. I mean, it is amazing. You know, when you go into that frog position and you put your arms out and your legs up, now, even if you have a rucksack and all that, you tend to stabilize. And then you hit terminal velocity, and that's where you kind of stay. And you can steer and maneuver and all that. It is amazing. But the part I still don't understand, what got me to jump out of that plane? You know, I try to visualize that. Do you ever think about that?
Jump master.
Perfectly good airplane.
Oh man. And then the oxygen bottles. Like you were saying, you even went higher to up to 30,000. It was an 8-minute oxygen bottle. Is that right? I think it was 8 minutes. Yeah.
Walk around.
So most of us on our normal jumps, which were below 20,000 feet, most of them were at 10 to 15, I think, in Halo school. We never even pulled that thing. Because it wasn't regulated the way later versions of it, you know, it was all or nothing. So you pull that thing and you get that oxygen just hit. So we just didn't even use it. We just held our breath. That was easy. Yeah. I'd hold my breath for a minute. The longest jump I had, 2 minutes, I think, at 24,000 feet. Yeah, sound about right? Yeah. So I got really good at that, holding my breath, because I couldn't. Or, because when we were in the planes, we were in oxygen tanks, as you know. You know, it's when you jump out that the air is totally different. Very thin up there, no oxygen. But if you hold your breath, it works. And then after that 1 year in the 6th Special Forces Group, I got my orders to the 5th. That's where it budded. So I was really fortunate because, as Vinny knows, in the military, when you were in Special Forces, as an NCO, you could stay there for your entire career. And it got really better in the 60s and 70s when they made it a career field for the NCOs, and you were able to get to Sergeant Major and stay in Special Forces. In the officer side, that didn't work that way. In the officer side, you had commitments to go through a process, like, you know, you had to go to the advanced course and you had to get an education if you didn't have one, and they wanted you to have a master's degree, and they wanted, you know, all kinds of things. And then command general staff, college stuff. And then you got to get command time, so that doesn't work in Special Forces, because what, you were only in charge of 11 people? Is that all you did?
That's all you did.
You were a team leader? Are you kidding me? A captain? Because a company commander has 200 to 250 people. So they just couldn't comprehend that. So that was meaningless. So as an officer, it was actually detrimental to your career to spend, we talked about that last night, to spend too much time in Special Forces. Because Special Forces was not the way at that time. Now you have a separate branch for it. I mean, they're recognized. Then I was infantry. That was my branch. Yeah. So I had a responsibility to, you know, do things that an infantry officer would have to do. So anyway, so I get to Vietnam in 1969, and how many of you remember the name Colonel Rowe? One of the finest commanders of 5th Special Forces Group of all time. He was relieved for an assassination, a TWEP, of a village chief. That was ordered by the CIA. I'm sure most of you are aware of that story. And it was so unfortunate, he got a really raw deal. It was a big military court-martial and all kinds of stuff. Because the bottom line is, the CIA, as they often do, ordered these things, and who did the dirty work? Special Forces. And then when it came down, if something went wrong, were the CIA around? No. Who was left holding the bag? Special Forces. That happened in Colonel Rowe's situation. He was relieved as commander of 5th Special Forces Group. That's when I came in country. They had a commander of the 5th Special Forces Group, a leg, who broke his leg trying to get airborne qualified to be the commander of 5th Special Forces Group. I walk into his office, he instantly hated me. Because I already had, you know, my senior wings and all that stuff as a young lieutenant. Not supposed to have that stuff. And I already had prior enlisted service, you know, and he just hated everything about me because they had sent him in there to clean up Special Forces, you know. The guy looked me in the face and he honestly said, I'm so sick of you Special Forces playboys. You're gonna be reassigned to an infantry unit. I said, I'm overqualified for that. And he said, no, you're not. You're gonna wind up being a platoon. Kicked me out of the 5th Special Forces Group, even though I had orders for the 5th Special Forces Group, and had me reassigned to the 1st Infantry Division as a platoon leader. I was so overqualified for that job. I mean, I'm Halo qualified. I'm you know, I've got all the credentials to be in the 5th. He probably saved my life, because as gun-ho as I was back then, I'd have probably gotten killed. Like a lot of my friends. Like, do any of you know the name Heinz Rush? He was another crowd like me who was in Special Forces. He also went to OCS, and he got killed over there in one of the SOG teams, because I could see me volunteer for that shit. Anyway, didn't wind up in the 5th group, wound up as a platoon leader in the 1st Infantry Division. Career-wise, that was a big bonus, because I got my CIB, you know, all the things you're supposed to have as an infantry officer with the 1st Infantry Division as a platoon leader. But like I say, I think I was overqualified for it. The 1st Division, I don't know if they liked me or not, because they decided to leave Vietnam. May have been because of me, may not. But I was one of the last. They didn't like SF. Nobody liked SF in those days. If you'll think back to the late 60s, 70s, we got very unpopular. People were very jealous of us. General officers hated us because they weren't allowed to see what our mission was. They didn't have a clearance that authorized them to know what Special Forces were doing. So they just hated it. You all have a special reason you did that job. And like I say, I'm kind of telling my story, why I wound up, why I think I was right for that job. There was a reason, every one of you, why you wound up in DET-A. There was something unique about you that somebody, I don't know who did that back at the Pentagon. And actually,
Mrs. Palmer and Mrs. Alexander.
Mrs. Alexander, I remember the name. You're right.
She's from Germany, Mrs. Palmer.
Yes. But you know, you're all very unique in that sense. And like Bob said earlier, you all have a story. Everybody has a story. They're all different, but they're almost the same too. Because we all wound up being there for a very unique reason. So anyway, back to the infantry thing. 1st Division left on me, so they sent me down to the 3rd Brigade, 9th Infantry Division to finish out my tour. I did that and left Vietnam with all the things that were good for my officer career, but I was really bummed about not having been a part of the SF thing in Vietnam, because as you all know, one of the reasons DET-A was kind of in the dark until Bob brought it out of the cold. All the emphasis whenever anybody talks Special Forces during that era was always Vietnam. What did you do in the 5th? You know, if you were in the 5th group, that was Special Forces. Nobody even knew that we existed. I mean, all the weird, cool stuff we did in Detachment A, nobody knew.
Peter Kelley, Wolfgang Ostertag, Ron Brodin, and J.T. Guard were asked to break into the U.S. military liaison mission compound to test their security. This facility had armed guards with live ammunition. Naturally, no problem for the team. The photos show the team in the commanding officer's office.
And that was one of the difficult things about being in a unit like that. Think about it. You've got all this cool stuff you're doing and you can't tell anybody about it. It's all,
no one would believe you.
You know, yeah, it was just so weird shit. Our stingers and our well rods and the little spikes we had that you throw on the road to cause flats and all that stuff. We had the weirdest stuff. Underground firing range, you know.
High standard.
It was amazing the stuff we had, you know. But anyway, so back to, I did have another job that I felt really helped prepare me for the DET-A thing. because I had to do the other things like the advanced course and all the boring stuff. But I did wind up being assigned back in Germany again, because like I say, once in a while somebody must have looked at my records and said, damn, he's native German. That works. So they sent me to be the liaison officer to the German army at the point where the two armies meet. The German army and the American army, the balloon went up. I got to interact with the 3- and 4-star generals as a young captain. I had a good sense of humor, so that worked. Because that can be intimidating, having, you know, like a 4-star general who designs his own uniform and he comes out looking like Dracula. He's got a red cape and all, and 2 45s on his hip. You know, you general officers at the higher levels, they're different. Believe me when I say that. And so here I am, a young captain, assigned to, in a palace in Germany, Schloss Oranienstein, in Dietz an der Lahn, which is near Limburg, just north of Frankfurt, the headquarters of the 5th Panzer Division, 5th Panzer Division, commanded by Generalmajor Lem, very famous World War II officer. He was in charge of that tank division. I lived with the Germans. I became German again. I wore an American uniform, but whenever the Americans would visit or we would have, you know, maneuvers and stuff like that, I would wear my American uniform, but I would be with the Germans. Because anytime, and I had the fortune of having my OERs written by General Otis. He was my direct, you know, supervisor, because I worked at that level to where the 3rd Armored Division, he was the commander at the time of the 3rd Armored Division, and then his, let's see, who was his? G3. He wrote my OERs and Otis had to review them. So I found out later that there's a thing called General Officer Influence. It was stamped all over my records because I got along with him. He liked me. You know, I always had a good sense of humor, and the minute I got those Germans and Americans, the higher ranking officers together, they all refought World War II. They all know what we know now. We should have gone and got the Russians while we had a chance, right? Yeah. And they all believed that, and they got along very well. And I would organize things like, you know, soccer matches and stuff, and you know what it's like when you get a bunch of Americans playing a bunch of Germans in soccer. They have all the footwork and all the finesse, and the Americans just want to tackle them. But it worked out. Everybody was muddy and happy, and we drank beer afterwards and all. But that was a really good experience, again, to bring my German up to a level as an adult, you know, and having to interact with people at a very high level in the military. You good? Yeah.
Yeah.
And it gave me a lot of experience. And again, even at this time, I still didn't know there was a DET-A. I just didn't know. I mean, I can't believe that I went that long in my military career before I finally wanted. Oh no, I had to go do a couple of other things. Like I said earlier, they want you to have good education. I didn't have a full degree, so they sent me to bootstrap. 1 year in University of Tampa. All expenses paid. Cool. Got to finish my degree. The military was good to me. I think all of you feel the same, right?
Amen.
The military would, if you were good at what you were doing, they liked you and they took care of you, you know? And that was one of those things. They took care of me. They let me get a degree in psychology. That made me even weirder. But actually that helped with my DET-A assignment, because I was dealing with a lot of people that dealt with psychological. No, I'm kidding. I'm embarrassing.
Needed a nurse.
But no, it did help, because I did give, when I got to DET-A, I remember getting classes, remember Bob, on terrorism, and in those days we had the Bader Meinhof, that was really big over there in Germany, and the Red Army faction, and Carlos, and we had all the cards and everything. So I gave classes on, you know, what kind of mentality becomes a terrorist and stuff like that. And I enjoyed doing that, and that psychology degree kind of helped me in that.
Rota Armee Fraktion.
Rote Armee Fraktion.
Yeah.
In Bad Meinhof, it was ironic when I had that
Lawyers,
liaison
from
officer
Berlin.
job in Limburg. They had a prison, and that's where a bunch of the Bad Meinhof people were incarcerated. And so they had the prison, the people all had to work at some kind of labor, you know, to make a contribution, and they got paid pennies for it. But I took all of my Vietnam magazines and stuff and sent them there, and they bound them, hardcover books. And I was always wondering, did the Baader Meinhof bunch get involved in making those books? Because that's where they were incarcerated. But that was the big thing at that era, you know, before DET-A got into counterterrorism, that wasn't our mission, as you know. That mission came along in the late 70s, and I'll get into that in a minute. So after I left that job, I went directly to Detachment A Berlin. And I did get the word, I did show up looking more like a German. Somebody had sent me a notification, don't show up in a uniform, you know, wear civilian clothes. And another thing that I wound up doing at DET-A, and I think you may have been attending one of that, I used to give classes on how to look and dress like a German. There are some vast differences. You walk in and you're wearing white socks, or you had the high pants, man, you were picked up in a minute as an American. Or you had to have your Lucky Strikes, or your Zippo lighter, all the things you had to give up if you were in DET-A, if you wanted to look like a German. You know, wearing your wedding band on the wrong side. Germans wear it on the right. Americans wear it on the left. You're instantly compromised if you do that wrong. You know, there were just a lot of things. I think I turned it into a 1-hour presentation at that time. But it was, you know, it was useful, because if you're going to be there in that job and you're supposed to be a German, well then you're going to have to adopt the mannerisms, you know. The way they held their cigarettes. Germans, gay, but that's the way they held them. An American would never, you know. I mean, things like that, you know, that you grew up, and if it wasn't a habit, then how would you know, you know? So that was beneficial when I got the DET-A. And that's what I kind of call this, I was born for that job. I was born to be in DET-A. Think about it. A German kid that wanted to be American, that finally wound up being American, that joins the military and gets to be in a unit where you have to pretend to be a German. Hello! Hello! Here I am. The only thing that screwed that up, that name. They took, when my stepdad adopted me, I don't know, he must have used a cheap attorney. They turned Klaus Peter into Claude Peter. Huh? I mean, Claude's a French name, right, Bob?
Right.
Yeah. So that kind of, I should have had
Put
it
the
changed.
two of them together.
Yeah. Claude Pierre. That wasn't me at all. So everybody that met me, even the guys in DET-A, unless you were in my team or you were Stan Olchovik or Jeff Raker, didn't know I was native German, because I had this name Kelley.
He caught on.
Yeah. After a few minutes with me, you'd know. I really enjoyed my time as a team leader.
Yeah.
I had some iconic team members. I only need to mention a few. JT Guard sitting over there, Ron Broughton, Nick Brockhausen, Mike Mullieri. I mean, some of the guys I had in my team. Gentry Deck, where is he? Teddy Bear.
I haven't seen Jeffrey.
He was one of the milder mannered guys on the team. He kind of kept it all, you know. God, I regret not seeing some of them. They were supposed to be here. I think Ron was supposed to be here. Mike was supposed to be here. Gentry. These were all guys on my team. As turns out, JT, I think you and I are the only ones, right?
Yep.
Was anybody else on my team that I don't remember?
That was it.
Joe wanted to be on my
I
team.
think I can out.
But, you know, they had to give each team a real young guy. Mine was Dougie Snow. Doug Snow wound up being on my team. So I had, he'd be in his late 60s, I think.
Genau, ja, ist
Ja.
ist.
Ja. Der ist selber Alter oder?
Der ist ein Jahr oder zwei älter als ich.
Also. Very unique group of people. I was really impressed. My team sergeant, Wolfgang Ostertag, native German. I think nobody ever heard about.
Yeah, you called me about 6 months ago.
Oh, he's still alive?
He's in Bremerhaven, worked for General Motors for several years, retired, bought a house in Bremerhaven, called me, trying to get a hold of Bob Picknell.
Oh.
He's still alive.
Cool.
Wolfgang is.
Yeah, because like me, he kind of went away and just, you know, just
Immer noch ein Jägermeister.
Yeah.
Wirklich.
But yeah, so I had a very unique team. I had the honor of getting to interact as the first team leader with some German organizations or units that were very unique. I took the first team to GSG 9. And the way that happened, Stan Olchovik, Jeff Raker, and I, we went down there to Von Hengelar and got drunk with them. And they liked us.
Stormtroopers, those guys.
And the way it worked in those days, Stan Olchovik was in charge, and he was a good guy. He really was pro-SF, pro-DET-A, all these things, and didn't give a shit about these conventional generals that tried to make us do things differently. He stood up to them. Great time for DET-A. When he came in, because the commander I had before then, I don't speak of too highly. It was a Colonel Rao. I don't know if any of you remember that name. You remember about it. That was a terrible era for DET-A. Because Colonel Rao, there was a Colonel Cater who was the Berlin Brigade commander. And I understand he later wound up at Devon's and the rest. He hated SF. But I have a little story to tell about that. Bob knows it. As a team leader, you know, Cater wanted everybody to brief him all the time. Well, he wasn't allowed to know half that shit that we did. You know, so he came to my team room, puffing on his cigar and blowing cigar smoke in my face, and expected me to brief him. And I said, "Sir, you're going to have to put out that cigar if you want me to brief you, because I can't breathe." And that stunned him. He didn't know how to react. He put out the cigar, you know, because he didn't expect that. Everything went fine. I gave him the briefing and all that. The next day, he called me over to his office. And you talk about somebody getting reamed. Don't you ever approach a senior officer and tell him to do anything. Hey, I said, "Sir, I wasn't able to breathe. You know, what do you want me to do?" Bad era. The Stan Olchovik era, when he took over DET-A, that's when things really started happening.
Gott sei Dank.
Jawohl, das war. It was, without a doubt, I think, unless somebody can correct me and prove me wrong, that was the best era for DET-A. We did things, because that's when the counterterrorism mission came along.
What years approximately?
I was there 75 to 79. Stan and, well, Jeff Raker was there before Stan Olchovik. He kind of recruited him and brought him over. In what year was it? 77?
76, and that's when All Plan 300 came along,
Yeah.
what you're talking about.
So 76, 77, we transitioned into really getting some cool backing and missions. Our tie-in, I don't know if you guys know that, but we interfaced with Satfi, Satfi, the commander of Southern Operations for Task Force for Europe.
Similar backgrounds.
I met that guy. That was, you know, our. We had a liaison officer at Camp Satfi, and all that stuff was classified back then. By the way, did I thank Bob for bringing me out from the cold.
I only tried to get him out there 15 times.
Oh, it finally worked, because he said, Pete, it's all declassified now. And that's when I found out about, I'll have to give State credit for, the book is a good chronological record of Special Forces. He did a lot of background work, he did a lot of research, and I even had to consult it to get my head together, you know, years and dates and names and stuff like that. It goes off a little bit in the end on, you know, it's all about his team and the team he was involved in. You would think there were no other teams in Special Forces, DET-A, other than that one team. Well, wrong. For example, like, you know, with the GSG-9 thing, he didn't really know the whole story, how that all happened. And like I said earlier, a lot of these things happened with Stan Olchovik, Jeff Raker, and I would go to these German units or commanders and stuff, and we'd have to drink with them. And it worked. I don't know, maybe we were charismatic or whatever it was.
Sir, did you go to the Torgau function with Olchovik? Stanley went there. Torgau is a place where they crossed the river and met the Germans after World War II, or met the Russians. And they have a function every year where Russian officers show up to steal all the booze they can, load it into their jeeps, and leave. And Olchovik went there and was approached by Colonel Pokuya, who was the security officer of Berlin on the other side. And he asked him formally, "Are you planning a kidnapping at Torgau?" That everybody, he had a reputation in the Eastern Zone, Olchovik. They had fear of him.
Yeah.
He's a good man.
Yeah, he was a very well-known, as far as the international community. Yeah, Stan wouldn't be able to go undercover.
But
That wasn't going to happen.
But
It's not
Rick,
posted
going
every day.
on what that Torgau party, I was held over Potsdam mission where I did my last 6 months over in Berlin because Colonel Katz would extend me. And it goes on that colonel also told Colonel Olchovik, "Oh, by the way, how's your scuba team doing? We saw them training over at Devonse last week."
Really?
Guilty.
Yeah, and that's another thing that Stick points out really well in his book. The East Germans and Russians were always trying to find out about us. They knew we were there, but they didn't know the details. Because just like Cater, the commander of Berlin Brigade, we didn't tell him anything. You know, we didn't let people into our buildings. You know, it was so secret, so classified, the stuff that we did. The GSG-9, let me get back to that one. What an experience. Here we are, we're giving the first mission, probably in the US military, not just for Europe, I think, because it was before Charlie Beckwith, in counterterrorism. You know, it was a unique mission, to say the least. And to go to a place, GSG-9, the Germans had just, after the Munich disaster, they said, we're going to have a really good professional counter-terrorist unit, and they did. I mean, we rode around in armor-plated Mercedes vehicles on the Autobahn, going over 200 kilometers an hour, and they had weaponry, all the Heckler and Koch, and the Steyr-Mannliche sniper rifles and stuff like that. They had equipment that put ours to shame, and it really did. But it got us input that we were able to use to get more funding, to get better equipment. And we wound up, oh my God, the stuff we did with the GSG-9 people, I don't know how many teams eventually went there, but it was a good relationship. Mogadishu in '77, Colonel Wegener, Ulrich Wegener, got to know him real well. And Frieder Baum was his adjutant, and he got to be a friend. He even visited me in California one time. Gave me the uniform and everything. I was going to go on that mission to Mogadishu with GSG-9. The State Department found out about it. holy shit. You talk about, they said, there's no way an American is gonna go in a GSG-9 uniform to Mogadishu and create an international incident. So that was nixed. I still kept the uniform, but I didn't get to go to Mogadishu. Although Colonel Wegener did send me a book signed by,
Oh, that's
that Mogadishu book, if you've never seen it, it's in German though. I don't think he ever put out an English version.
Did he ever write a book? Or
Yeah,
something
that
like-
Mogadishu one.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and that's the one he sent me and signed it along with I still have my GSG-9 mug, crystal mug.
That's clenched.
Again, it goes back to, I was born for that job. I was. These were Germans. I put on a different uniform, they think I'm a German. I wind up being German, So how can it not work? Getting back to the triumvirate, Stan had the authority and he had the know-how to get these people on board. Jeff and I, we had to go see the Germans and drink with them. The Ranger School, what was his name again? I had his name written down. Anyway, we went to his house drinking beer amounts I don't even want to try to remember. Sleeping in sleeping bags on the floor in his house, and he joined us. Instead of sleeping in his bed with his wife, he was in a sleeping bag on the floor with me and Jeff, and that sealed the deal. The next day when we woke up, it was a done deal that we were going to have an exchange program with the Rangers, So we started sending people down to Ranger School. GSG-9. Once we met the people, and Jeff and I, in German, hey, it was a done deal. We started having exchange programs with GSG-9. The thing that bothered me most, and Colonel Wegener, later General Wegener, the CIA and the FBI were very jealous of us because they didn't have that ability to get to work with these units and have exchange programs with them because they weren't the same kind of people. I don't know how many of you worked with the intel community. They're weird. They just are. You you need to realize if you want somebody from another culture to work with you, you gotta become like them. The CIA and the FBI, they never managed to do that. Colonel Wegener, who told me last night that he went back to the FBI school?
I went with him.
You were there,
I
right?
was there, yeah.
Yeah. He didn't like the FBI, because it was, he always looked at it, it's a one-way street. They want all kinds of things from me, and they want all, but they won't do anything for me. You know, they won't share any information, not even intel that would be beneficial in me, you know, doing some of my operation. So when they would ask me, hey, Kelly, can you get us in with Colonel Wegener? I said, no, he didn't like you guys. You know, he didn't want to talk to you. He didn't want you anywhere near his building, because he just didn't. But he liked DET-A. He liked our people. You know, he liked me and Jeff when we drank with him and stuff like that. You know, and they liked Stan Olchovik, because, you know, he was an old DP that was now American. They respected that and they liked that. So that worked. That worked for the Ranger School. It got us into Mittenbach with the ski school. You know, the winter warfare training. Do you realize that those qualifications, how many of you went to that winter warfare?
I did.
Yeah. That was a great school. I mean, you learned everything. After that school, you could run a ski school. You could run a mountain. You could, if you wanted to retire and run a ski resort, you had the ability, because they taught you everything, to include winter warfare and like medical evacuations with the Okios and all that stuff. But you became a very good skier too. And my name was Captain Video back then when it came to skiing. Remember that, Minnie, when you came on board? What's that guy? Minnie tried to outdo me and he wore a red ski suit. Anyway. But we got in with all these people, and I don't know, 75 to 80, it was just amazing. Berlin SEK, guy named Peter, same name I had. You know, because I always went by Peter with Germans, Peter. I never used that frog name, that wasn't me. It kind of always surprised them when I said Kelly, so I had to do this brief explanation. Yeah, I'm native German, I was born in Wiesbaden, but then my stepdad was American and I took his name. I kind of got that down to less than a minute. Because they always wondered, you know, what's this guy Kelly, Irish name and all that. But Berlin SEK turned into an excellent relationship, you know. And that was all during that era, when we, in the late 70s. The trips to Bavaria, who was I talking to last night or this morning? Sometimes they didn't go well. We had to go to Bavaria to jump, to maintain our airborne status.
First and Feldberg.
Yes, you were talking to me about it, first and Feldberg. With one time,
Same place.
and you reminded me
Snipers,
that they
firing
carried
seven.
me in at the end of the evening, I know. What happened, here's the real story. Actually, it's very close to your real story. I didn't remember that until you told me. We used to have to fly around down there. And weather permitting, we'd get in a jump. Weather not permitting, we had to land somewhere and then just spend the night there in our sleeping bags and stuff like that. Well, that one time, we wound up at Fürstenfeldbruck, and that's where the German Air Force Academy is. So we went to their local club that they had, and we started drinking with these guys. A lot of things revolved about having to drink beer in those days, if you'll remember, right? I mean, that half of our lives were spent having to drink beer. I was good at it then. I wouldn't be able to do that now. I don't think I would last in that job for 5 minutes. So we wind up drinking with these cadets. Again, they really liked us. They were intrigued by the fact a bunch of Americans wearing coveralls with no insignia, no names, no nothing. Who are these guys? They were curious as hell and buying rounds and I guess before I left in the state I was in, I wound up, I got an honorary mug though. I had that mug for a long time. Things like that.
What happened later that night?
They had to carry me into my sleeping bag.
He doesn't know, Bob.
I just found out. I had an instant flashback when you told me that story. But, you know, it was just such a unique experience. And wouldn't you agree, I think I was born for that job. I really was. Not only born as a German, but prior enlisted SF medic, you know, spoke German, experience in 10th Special Forces Group, and then DET-A. Nothing could top that. After that, I think I had one more assignment as a Special Forces advisor with a Readiness Group Los Angeles. And what that entailed, I would go to all of the Special Forces units, but they were mostly like National Guard or Reserve units back on the West Coast. They did have one up in Seattle, Washington. They had real Special Forces people. And then I would just, you know, interact with them, just like ROTC duty, I think. And after that, I decided to retire because that wasn't a lot of fun. Because I had a commander that was, again, very anti-Special Forces, and he didn't like the fact that I had too many awards and stuff like that. So after 20 years in the military, I retired, 5 years as an NCO medic, and 15 years as an officer. I had orders at that time to go to Commandant General Staff College. I was going to be a light colonel, and then I would be a battalion commander in Fort Bragg and probably to the Middle East. And my wife and son said, we're not going. They had been nothing but, you know, Germany, Fort Benning, Fort Bragg, Germany, Fort Benning, Fort Bragg. And we got to California and they fell in love with it. The weather is amazing. Great place to live as far as, you know, the weather goes. I'm a very conservative, patriotic American.
Here, here.